and welcome to the QA Financial Digital Forum USA. Let's now just talk a little bit about Subhadeep and his presentation, which we're going to be starting in just a few minutes' time. So Subhadeep Bhattacharjee is Senior Vice President and Global Head of Quality Engineering at Northern Trust, and I'll ask him to describe that role in a little bit more detail when we start our Q&A conversation on the hour. But I just want to give you a little preview of what we're going to be discussing. So Subhadeep is going to be talking about what he describes as the rocket fuel for improving software quality at financial firms, which is, that rocket fuel, a new blend of centralized services and federated development, a new approach to that well-established challenge of the extent to which large and complex financial firms we're talking about today should concentrate their resources in what we used to call, I think many of us still do, the test center of excellence or the central facility, and the extent to which they should generate best practice in different parts of the business. And of course, this has worked for many large financial firms, that federated approach, because best practice, for example, can be established in those parts of the business where there are more complex requirements for app development, such as in the trading or the risk or the derivatives business. Subhadeep's going to talk about the right blend that Northern Trust has fixed on, and what Northern Trust is doing to establish the right gates for its apps, the right quality gates for its apps in the DevOps era. And in particular, I think perhaps most interesting of all, we'll be discussing the new diagnostics and dashboards for code quality that Northern Trust has established. And in particular, we're talking about Northern Trust's automated production validation system as part of its dashboard for enterprise software quality management. So that's going to be very interesting. And then we've also asked Subhadeep to take a deeper dive into two technical topics that are high on the agenda at many financial firms today. The integration and risk management of open source tools as, of course, an alternative to off-the-shelf software quality assurance and testing tools, and also the rollout of microservices technologies. And here in the UK, where QA Financial and our company QA Media is based, this challenge was thrown very much into highlight by the problems at TSB, one of our leading banks, retail banks here in the UK, which had suffered an almost total collapse of its retail banking platform back in 2018, when the bank was in the process of a major digital transformation and was trying to implement microservices technology, but failed to do so because subsequent investigations revealed its management did not fully understand microservices. So the huge potential that microservices technologies offer software developers have to be set against the technical challenge of actually implementing them, which may not be as easy as we might hope. So that's something we're going to be talking about with Subhadeep. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Subhadeep Bhattacharjee. Thank you very much for joining us. You're in Chicago, of course, where Northern Trust.
Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Let's start by talking about your role at Northern Trust, because one of the trends I'm very interested in is the emergence of the Chief Quality Officer. So going back to the financial crisis, we saw the promotion, if you like, of the role of the Chief Risk Officer, the Chief Financial Risk Officer, as a result of the crisis and the need for more controls, and indeed more pressure from regulators for managers to take responsibility for financial risk. So this role was crystallized and became, a key role. Existed before, but it was promoted, as I say. Perhaps we're seeing something similar today with the Chief Quality Officer. As software becomes more important to financial firms, yes, but also the proliferation of platforms make the challenge of managing that software and managing software risk more complex. So can we start by talking a little bit about your role and how you've come to do the job that you're doing today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come here and talk to you, Matthew. So I think the industry swings both way here. That sometimes the pendulum goes far into the centralization mode and far left into the decentralization mode. Now that being said, let me go into my role specifically, the way I look into it, right? So the way I look into my role is basically more of a change agent, which not only controls the quality or allows the teams to manage the control of their software in a better way, but also as a change agent in terms of making people realize the value of quality and why you need to go 100 miles an hour, but at the same time, you cannot drop the ball on quality, especially because we are a financial firm, and any of the financial firms have a lot of regulations that goes along with it. Irrespective of the regulation, the way our customers look at us, they need to have the sense of that my business is with the right hands. So there's a lot of perspective that goes into what quality really means, and to me, it's much broader than just testing a requirement. And I look at my role with that same lens. Testing, although is a part, the BAU testing that we talk about is a part of my job, but it's much more than that. I deeply engage with my infra folks to understand what does it really mean to have my applications on a stack, and what does it really mean for me to be able to decouple my applications at any given point in time and do a testing whenever there is a new patch installed for on-prem stuff, right? So that's a part of the infra stuff. I also engage heavily with resiliency. So, for example, I'm running a program here at Northern Trust right now, which basically static scans applications which are mostly monolithic in nature, and gives us insights. And post which, I actually have sessions with the app owners to see how we can fix it. Now, is that a testing angle? No. Is that a quality angle? Yes. So I think that's how I like to look at my job, which is much beyond just testing and more about what the software quality should look like. I also, my group also builds the lower environments for code propagation. We are also driving DevOps. Release management is a big part of it, although now with agility being implemented across, the role of a release manager per se is going down. However, there is a lot of, for larger programs which involves multiple release trains and stuff like that, you need to have that vision in place. So my team also works with that function and provides technical expertise on how they can manage their jobs better. So long story short, my long shot is always to move people in the way they look at their deliverables and have that angle of quality always baked in. And if I have done that with a group, I think I would have done my job. So that's how I would define what I do at Northern Trust.
Great, and that of course that suggests a lot of topics that we hopefully can cram into this session. But let's just scroll back a bit first. Where as a firm has Northern Trust come from? I mean, picking a point that makes sense to you in terms of this enterprise organization, this centralized versus federated view.
Mm-hmm.
Where was the firm? Let's just take 5 years ago. Does it make sense to start then?
Yeah, I was not here at Northern Trust 5 years ago, but I can give you a glimpse of, based upon when I joined, the landscape I saw based upon that. But so, and I think this is a trending with most of the centralized, if you call it a TCOE, that's what rings a bell in my head. Testing Center of Excellence. Not that it's a bad thing. However, the way sometimes we approach it is probably wrong. And in my experience, what I've seen, and that was what is happening at Northern Trust, was the Testing Center of Excellence was not amalgamation of practices. It was more of an amalgamation of how many resources do you need? What skill set do you need? Right? It was more becoming an outsourcing center from inside Northern Trust than being a thought generator or an idea generator. I think that's the paradigm we wanted to really shift. I wanted to stop talking about how many testers you need as a part of a program to what is your true need of quality, right? Where are we failing in terms of providing the checks and balances that needs to be there as a part of the code propagation to the prod. A big part of that, if I break it down into 3 dimensions, the famous way of doing it is people, process, and tech. We had good tech in place, right? We had robust frameworks. We did not have owners, right? We had a very low percentage of employees at strategic positions who are driving some of those critical functions that we talked about. So my first business of order was to see how we can change that mix. At all strategic positions, we have driven the employee headcount up to ensure that we have leaders, thought leaders who can drive it and who are employees of the organization. Again, nothing against the vendors. I think the vendors do a fantastic job, and without them, it's not possible for us to do anything. But I think it almost changes the game when you have a strategic in a strategic position an employee of the organization. Also, we have invested in setting up our India center. We have a good footprint now, both in US and in India and in London, where we need employees for the strategic positions and locations. Skill set of the employees and the vendors was a big challenge because we talk about microservices, we talk about applications going to cloud. We talk about how SDETs are becoming the new norm of testing. So we really needed to look it from a different angle. So embarked on this change in skill set across all the vendors that we work with. We had made that not only they should be business knowledge enriched, but at the same time they should have basic technology skills to write, read code, and talk the developer language. From the processes standpoint, it almost felt like one silver bullet can solve all problems, which is probably not the right answer. So we made it more of a push and pull kind of a scenario where centrally ideas are generated, but at the same time we are pushing it to the different teams, but also getting ideas from the different teams that what they truly need and what they are doing. And can that be moved around the enterprise to get more traction? We made it less that you have to do it this way to more, hey, if you do it this way, this might lead you to that direction. So it was more of a force feed to more opening dialogues on how do you really want to do it to the respective teams. And as I said, tech was always there. Tech was not my biggest problem when I joined this job. It was more of the other two. But again, from a tech perspective, we wanted to go. The primary shift that, if you will, we have done is rather than us doing it by ourselves, we are enabling the teams. And we will talk about that. You talked about APV, automated production validation. I will talk about that there too. That how we are now saying that you don't have to give me the stuff so that I can automate things for you. You can automate it yourself. Here is the platform, right? So I think that's the basic shift that we are going through, empowering the teams, empowering the agile teams, the pods, so that they can run at a faster rate.
Okay, and great. And where would you say you are today then, Northern Trust, on the curve of your journey? Let's talk about in terms of automation, in terms of continuous integration, continuous delivery, whatever key benchmarks you have. We're going to talk more about your automated production validation system in a minute, the dashboard. But in terms of the broader transformation, where would you say you are now, and where do you want to be in 2-3 years time, whatever time?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, from an analogy standpoint, I would say that we have built the pieces of the car in isolation. Now is the time for us to put everything in motion together. So we have the stacks, for example, we have the infrastructure laid out right. There is a way that you can propagate code. There are checks and balances. There are teams that are sent up who can actually support your UAT, almost like prod, with all the monitoring set up. There is automation set up at the application level. There is automation set up at the integration level. There is automation set up at the production level, but we do not have this one full swing of vision where the code moves from lower environment to the prod, and you do not have to click a button. We are not there yet. However, we have built the individual pieces which can do the work, not seamlessly yet. So in the next 2 years, our vision would be to primarily, now that we have the roadmap, we want to make sure that all these pieces can be fit together. So that's we are working towards.
Very broadly speaking, we're going to talk about open source tooling, as I mentioned, a little bit later. But in terms of external vendors, tool vendors, consultants, I mean, has the plan been to become less dependent on them in terms of numbers, in terms of the proportion of work that gets done? Is that a core objective?
Well, again, as I said, Northern Trust has historically been a very employee-friendly and organization, and if I really look into that a little bit more, while we are employee friendly, we have been more friendlier towards the needs of the customer. So we have baked ourselves in a way which is more operation based, more business based. Technology was a focus, but not on the forefront of the focus. That scenario has drastically changed over the last 5 years. What that means is, yes, we cannot do our business without the vendors, right? And without even not only from a vendor perspective providing us resources, but also from a product standpoint. Right, we're not going to get away from any of those. However, I think the focus shift has been that how can we have more employees running those strategic platforms. That was something run by vendors previously. That is a shift. That is the fundamental shift that the Northern Trust is going through. So I'll give you an example. I have increased my employee headcount by 28% over the last year. That would tell you how important this is for us. In terms of changing the dynamics of the people who actually run the organization.
And what kind of people have you been hiring?
Well, again, I have sat through a couple of those, and my focus was always on can we get the people who can think the right way. Technology is something we can all pick up. That analytical skill is probably the most important, especially in an quality engineering job. Our technologies change every day. However, can we think the right way? Can we think the way that probably a hacker could think? Can we think the way that we can predict where the fail points could be and how we can mimic that? I think that's more of an analytical skill, more and less of a technical skill. So that's how I gear myself, or how I talk to individuals when they are interested in joining our organization.
And just before we finish on this sort of train of thought, what about your role? I mean, I was talking about the emergence of the Chief Quality Officer. How would you say your role is crystallizing in this respect? I mean, you're in charge of enterprise quality assurance. You're in charge of the view that Northern Trust has across the enterprise of quality assurance. Do you feel that role is changing day by day? That the reporting of software risk is something that's becoming, to use your expression, baked into that role? I think Subhadeep's connection is just frozen. We may have to wait just a moment for him to come back. Yeah, I can only apologise. We have to wait for him to reboot his link. And here he comes back. Can you hear me, Subhadeep? I think he's back. Are you back with us, Subhadeep?
Matthew, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I think we had a little glitch. My Zoom just went off on me. I'm not sure why.
That's okay. We just had a bit of a gap for a minute. I'm sure we have all with us. We were talking about your role. Let's move on to talking in a little bit more detail about this automated production validation system, which is I guess, the key dashboard that you have. But before we do that, I would just like to point out to our audience that we will be leaving some time for questions at the end of this session, 5 minutes or so. You'll see on your screen the Q&A button. Just write in your question there, and I'll see it, and I'll be able to put that to Subhadeep. Okay, the automated production validation system. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What does it do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Matthew, we spend so much time fixing our left or going deep into the left when we talk about testing, meaning, let's start about testing all the way from, the ideation mode and whatnot, right? So that's going deep in the left. Sometimes we forget about strengthening our right. So automated production validation is all about strengthening your right, meaning when you have so majority of the times our codes get deployed over the weekend, and Sundays before the business comes to forefront. How do I know that all my systems are working fine? Now, my monitoring tools are not the exact way to tell me that all my message queues are flowing intact, so on and so forth, because my business has not started yet, right? So automated validation, production validation is a way by which it tells me my system is up and running. My systems are up and running at any given point in time. This used to be a Sunday to Sunday event that we used to run across EMEA, across US, across APAC timelines when the business was starting for the day. We used it for two purposes. One, whenever there was an application change per se, and a fresh code was moved to prod, we wanted to make sure that even after so much rigorous testing in production, nothing is broken. The things are running as is in an automated way. And also, we had a different slice to it. Now, there are several patches that goes into the infrastructure installs every now and then. And I'm sure everybody has been bitten by this, that, hey, I did not do anything with my application. However, infrastructure, it deployed a patch. And however, the way they do test the infrastructure is pretty unique, because they just test the capacity before and after. There is no other science by which you can, you test every application. So what we did was we decoupled on which infra or on which stack our applications were laid out. And based upon that input, we automatically ran the health check on those applications for which the infra had changed, which gave us an immediate sense of what was broken and what is not. Last year, we had over 180 critical incidents that were saved due to this system that we had put into place. There was no. It was more of human understanding when we build the system. Now we are moving into more intelligent way of doing things, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But in gross terms, that is what automated production validation is. Your peace of mind in production that the app change or the infra change did not leave you with a massive incident that you did not anticipate.
And this relates to what we were talking about in describing your session, the right quality gates for the DevOps, the DevOps world. But then how
Correct.
does that then relate to the enterprise standards, benchmarks that you have for software quality? Is that the next step where you have a series of benchmarks derived from these improvements, these gates, where you can then create standards for software quality, which then translate into standards for software risk, which maybe you can talk to regulators about? Is that
Yeah,
part of the game plan?
exactly. I think that's exactly what we are going, and that is evolving our platform too. Now we're talking about more of diagnostics to right, a single pane, right, which tells me what is the health of my application. Now, if I tell that to a dev manager, give me the health of an application, that would mean a million different things. What is evolving from there is, what from a Northern Trust perspective do I want to learn during production about, say, for example, your queues, or for example, your your different directories with service IDs where there is, so on and so forth. You can keep going on and on. But I think so. What we are trying to do is categorize or have themes by which we can get more information, and asking the application teams to expose those APIs. Again, we are not doing for any of those applications. The application teams are doing that, but now they're taking more ownership of that. So they are exposing their APIs, and we are putting that on our diagnostics. Instead, what is happening is, at any given point in time, not only can I look at the health of the applications, but at the same time, I cut down the mean time to recovery, because my L3, L2, L1 support teams does not need developer presence all the time. The basic questions they ask, my APIs are there exposed, which can quickly give you the information that they want. So yes, you're right, Matthew. What is evolving out of these is are themes in which we are pushing the organization, not directives in terms of what you need to do, but these are the information that the team needs to be able to generate for the broader platforms to be adopted. And that's how the major shift is happening.
Okay. I wanted to move on to the topic of open source technologies, which I know you have some very interesting things to say about. Just another point of information for our delegates, our participants today. At 1:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, at the end, the final session of our agenda today, we've got 3 breakout sessions that are going to be talking about roundtables that you can join. We'll be discussing different issues around these challenges, the challenges of automation and benchmarking quality, the future of testing, if you like, and software quality assurance. And you can choose which session to join. The details are on your agenda. You'll just be able to click on whichever session interests you most. And indeed, join 1 or 2, although of course that session only lasts half an hour, so you'll have to be quick. Subhadip, I wanted to move on, as I said, to the topic of open source tooling, and where that sits, your management of open source tools. And this is a topic I think a challenge a lot of banks are facing, because a lot of them want to adopt more open source tooling, to integrate those in a managed way. Strategically, they want to use more open source, but the challenge is in forming a view, in integrating open source tools into a view of IT risk management. Tell us a little bit about the approach that you take at Northern Trust to this challenge.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, and I think everybody is fond of open source due to various reasons. But I think I really want to pull you to a stats that I was reading the other day in IBM Security Reports for 2020, and a couple of things that they were talking about is, each of the data breach in this modern day costs the organizations around $6 million a data breach, and 56% of the data breaches are malicious attacks. So you internally can only make your systems more robust, but you can't control those. But 16% of the data breaches are because of the way that you have used third-party softwares and open source, which asks us to take this a little more serious approach towards open source. And I think that's what the term that you used was manage open source technology, and I think that's the key. So at Northern Trust, what we have done is there are two parts to the equation. So whenever you bring in new open source framework, new open source product, new open source platform, we have an architectural review that goes on at an enterprise level, and that certifies if that is the right platform, product, technology for the organization. So those goes through a rigorous review. But we don't stop there. We have toolkits, and granted, not all health check tools or the static scanning tools, they don't scan for open source. But we're working very closely with CAST, and leveraging their module on how we scan through static scan their open source modules. And we are seeing a lot of vulnerabilities that needs to be mitigated, either in terms of licenses, either in terms of the way that they have been leveraged. And some of the frameworks were like 3-4 years old, and they needs to be mitigated. So we are looking at, and once you have generated that state goes to the backlog of the organization, of the development team. So we are looking at it from both angles. One, during the inception when you bring in, and at the same time continuously looking and monitoring about how you are leveraging your open source. But again, this is in the forefront of how we scan for the health of the organization in terms of software assets.
Okay, well we could talk about that. That could be an entire separate session, maybe.
Absolutely.
The other thing we wanted to talk about, because we do have a couple of questions I want to get on to before our session ends. Microservices, where are you with the implementation of microservices technologies? What are the key challenges? What advice would you give your peers or your colleagues at other firms?
This is a topic, I look at it more from a less technical aspect to a more human aspect of the organization. And the reason why I say that is when an organization wants to move away from microservices. So essentially what you are doing is you are changing the way that you are writing your code, and that comes from how you understand your business. We have always understood business from an angle of single inflow, and the application moves out stuff, right? But now we are opening it up in so many different avenues. The way we look at our business also needs to essentially change. So from my perspective, microservices is, to me, it has been here for the last 5-6 years, picked up its peak. But I think there were technologies, or there were concepts even before that which was similar to it, right? We talk about object-oriented programming and stuff like that. These are all evolutions of microservices to some kind in terms of how they were approached. So to me, it is more of a cultural problem or a cultural fix that we need to keep in place, that the product owners, the product managers should be able to look at their products from a different way, because now they have to think and put the use cases in a different way for the app dev. It's not an app dev problem only. There are also challenges about, I'm a big proponent of microservices. It might come out that I am not, but I'm a big proponent of microservices. It's only the things that we have to need to have in place before we go down that path. Irrespective of you are going to cloud or not, I think microservices is a fantastic way to deal with it. But at the same time, you have multiple breakpoints. So you need to have your testing adopted to a completely different level. You cannot talk about requirement testing anymore. You have to talk about code level testing. So if you have not enhanced your quality engineering practices, which can test at a code level and only looks at an end-to-end requirement, you probably will not be able to sustain microservices. So you have to change your quality practices. You have to change the way that you performance test your code. So that is goes for a complete paradigm shift in terms of in the microservices world. You are talking less end-to-end, more about granular stuff. So again, I will have a more human aspect to this than a technology aspect. And this is a huge shift from a technology, granted, but I think you need to be more well equipped in all of these other aspects too, as per me, Matthew.
We're running out of time. I wanted to squeeze in one question. You mentioned the cultural challenges in all this, Subhadeep. We do have a couple of questions. We only have time for one. Briefly, Somebody wants to know, we see this question often, what's the biggest single cultural challenge you faced in this transformation in terms of managing people in this DevOps transition? Has it been painful at times?
I don't think it's painful. I think I would use a different term. I think my biggest problem is, why would I change, or why do I change? Things are working fine with me. Why do I change?
Yeah.
I think that's the one biggest question that I think change management should address in an organization. And by any means, we should not short change management when we talk about DevOps at an enterprise level, or talk about microservices in enterprise. You should not short the change management aspect of it, and addressing those questions ahead of time, and giving power to the people on why they should do it, rather than forcing them to do it.
Thank you, Subhadeep. We've got to end there. Thank you so much.